Life After the Rams with Colin Gibson.
Welcome to episode 12 of Life After the Rams. Today I'm joined by Phil Brown. 20 years on from a turbulent, often misunderstood spell at Derby County, Phil finally tells his story in full. The boardroom politics, the dressing room fractures and having to sell his top striker. All lessons that he learnt and took into the rest of his career. This episode of Life After the Rams is brought to you in association with Seven Restaurant and Cafe Bar in Derby and Rams Trust, the Derby County Supporters Society. Established to promote good governance and fan engagement, they welcome new membership applications from all supporters. Just visit ramstrust.org.uk/membership for further details.
Life After the Rams with Colin Gibson.
Phil, it's good to chat after all these years. There is a part of me that almost thinks, should I start this with an apology? Because I was at Radio Derby at the time and you were the manager, and this was a real rough time for the football club itself. And you came into it and I guess bore the brunt of it. Just 20 years on, how do you look back at it?
I look on it as a real steep learning curve for me. I'd been flying under the radar, Colin, if truth be known, under the flag of Sam Allardyce's backroom staff. We had become a sort of a partnership at Blackpool to start off with. He was in his first year as a manager back in the 90s. I was in my first year as a coach. We had a guy called Mark Taylor who was in his first year as a physio. And we had a chief scout, Jack Chapman, who was 45 years in the game, and he sort of tied it all together. You know, when we were making mistakes, he was promising that we would make mistakes, and we did. But he was marking our card, and it was one of them where you're feeling your way through it. And that was the infancy of my career as a assistant manager, shall we say. We then rehooked the relationship, myself and Sam at Bolton. And then I had 6 or 7 really unprecedented, successful years at Bolton. And all the time that I was there, I was unfulfilled as a person. I was unfulfilled as a manager, because that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to be. And Sam always knew that. I think you know that, Colin. Sam always knew that I wanted to break away and do my own thing. And he put me down. I've said this many a time. He's put me down on. He told me to put him down on my CV as the only reference, so that he would know exactly what I was up to in the 6 or 7 years we were together, you know. Not for any mischievous reasons, just the fact that, you know, is it coming close? Do I have to prepare for this? Do I need to get a backroom staff, you know, to fill in when you leave? And he always had sort of Sammy Lee and Neil McDonald on the go. But that moment came, I think I only had 3 interviews. I had Burnley, Steve Cottrell got that job. I had West Bromwich Albion and Brian Robson got that job. And I was close on both of them, to be fair. And then I got the Derby County job, and the rest's history, as they say. But it was, as you say, how do I look back? I've loved Derby County as a football club ever since I was a boy, you know. And there's some strong connections, you know, with Derby County. You know, Colin Todd being one of them. It was, I don't know, it's one of them infancies or one of them apprenticeships that you have to go through to a certain extent. But when push came to shove and I got removed from the position, I really wanted the Derby fans to understand why I was making the decisions I was making, why we were struggling on the field of play, why we were in a relegation battle. All of these things are, you know, synergy is such an important word where football's concerned, and that's synergy from board to directors, to management, to players. It was just lacking connection, you know, any kind of what I'd been taught from being Sam's number 2. What I'd been taught that everybody needs to know what page we're on and all need to be singing from that same page. But there were so many individuals at Derby County, and when it happened, when I got the sack, my word, Colin, I had phone calls from all and sundry, had, you know, people who were saying, if you're going to go into management, you're going to get sacked. And I didn't believe that. I firmly believed that my first job was going to be my biggest job, my biggest challenge. It was going to be the best move of my life, and all of these things were going around in my head. And then 8 months, 9 months down the line, I'm out. So I was scarred. I have to say it, but it was a nice scar from Derby County's perspective. It was a horrible scar from the people that I'd been working with.
Football clubs say that they do their due diligence when they look at bringing in a player, bringing in a manager, bringing in whoever. Did you do any of your own due diligence on Derby at that time? Because they'd got problems. They got an ownership there who were unpopular with the fans. Or was it a case of, it was almost, this is my first job and I'm just going to take it?
Well, it was too good to be true at times. You know, you're thinking about the greats that have been before you, and it was such a privileged opportunity. But as you well know, Colin, it all seems rosy to a certain extent until you do your due diligence, and I wasn't experienced enough to do that. And I really wanted the job. I really felt like I could do something with the football club. I could have a go. I could make a success of it. And I had allies. I thought I had one or two people in there that I still talk to today. Michael Johnson being one of them. You know, I just signed the big fella, Darren Moore. I just signed him too late. He came into that changing room and absolutely smelt a rat. He smelt a toxic changing room. He smelt people that were going behind me back to the board and all of this thing. And he said to me, I think it was after the Colchester game, he said to me, if only I'd been a couple of weeks earlier, I could have wheedled out one or two of the people that are really sticking it into you. But it was too late. It was job done. And sometimes it does take one signing that's yours, one signing that really is yours and not Murdo's or not the board's or not whoever's. Or not for the sake of the fans, you know, because they wanted him or whatever, you know, because sometimes you have to bow down to that kind of wave of pressure, as it were, you know. But Darren was one of mine, and I'm thinking just didn't spend enough time with each other. Another couple of weeks becomes a month, and then next thing you know, you've just turned a corner and you've got somebody that's on your side in that changing room and sorting it out from within. Because it was an evil changing room, I've got to say it was a terrible changing room.
Let's go back to the start. They were known locally as the Three Amigos that had taken over the ownership of the football club. John Slightholme was the chairman. Jeremy Keith was the chief executive. Murdo Mackay was Murdo Mackay. And Ben Andrew Mackenzie was the finance director. And they really were the main players in terms of the ownership, weren't they?
Yes.
What do you recall of them as individuals and working relationships?
I had the utmost respect for them because you have to, you know, they're your boss for the time being for whatever it is. And I was very close to Murdo, and I didn't quite see what he was getting up to, you know, because you've got to keep your eyes and ears open. There's no doubt about it. But he was actually in everybody's pockets. He was in everybody's head. He was in the changing room, which is, you know, it's the wrong place for anybody like that to be in the changing room. A former agent, but he was very clever and very. He befriended me. You know, he became a very good ally. I thought he was on my side. I thought he seemed to be getting things done for me behind the scenes, as it were. But lo and behold, it was all illegal, you know. And did I delve enough into it? I should have maybe delved enough into it, but I was focusing on the football. I was focusing on the team. I was focusing on the job in hand and keeping my job, to tell you the truth. But he advised me on a couple of occasions, you know, and I look back at it and I thought to myself, I really should have stuck out for a stronger number two. I really should have stuck out for a more experienced number two. You know, the likes of a Roy McFarland, the people that I was interviewing at the time, maybe could have watched me back a little bit more instead of a Dean Holdsworth, who was more interested in continuing to play and then representing Derby County. I mean, dear me, coming to the end of his career, and he's playing for Derby County. But it's the argument against the ability versus who's on your side, who's got your back in the changing room. And I was working too hard for that kind of to protect myself and other people from the evil people that were in the club. I was working too hard. I should have been concentrating on the focus of my job. Should have been concentrating on the players, concentrating on the way we played, the coaching side of things. I'm not saying for 1 minute I was a bad coach. I went on the training ground full of good ideas and good intentions, but bottom line is when there's things going on behind your back, it's very, very difficult to, one, motivate, two, get them to understand what you're thinking and why you're thinking that. There was just so many battles to fight, Colin, but the chairman, he was very close to Murdo, barrister from what I can remember. Only met him on 2, maybe 3 occasions and spoke very well. Lived up in the Leeds area. Andrew Mackenzie was just a nodding dog, to tell you the truth. He just used to go along with anything that was going on. For a financial director, whenever Murdo wanted something, that was it. It was done. And Jeremy Keith was the one that I couldn't work out. I didn't know whose side he was on. I didn't know why he was there. It was very confusing, Jeremy Keith. And he would confuse you with, not like false promises, but there'll be a story one day and it'll be a different story the next day. And I'm like, there's no consistency with his delivery or with his train of thought. But the one person, strangely enough, who I felt the closest to was Murdo Mackay. And my word, I didn't think I'd be that bad a judge of character. And when it happened, I knew the sack was coming my way, or it was going to be Dean. If you remember rightly, Colin, it was going to be, if I get rid of Dean Holsworth and Bob Shaw, my chief scout, he would keep me in work. And I thought, I can't believe what I'm hearing here. He would keep me in work, so he had that much power. He could persuade the board to keep me in work if I got rid of me assistant manager, who he had recommended to bring in, and me chief scout. And the reason why the chief scout he wanted rid of was because he couldn't bring the players in that he wanted to bring in. So consequently, when I was into, not a vote, I wasn't into anything like that, but I would talk to people who are rated opinion-wise. And if that was in the early morning meeting, Bob Shaw, when it comes down to players, Bob Shaw knew a player. And he was working for a big football club and he knew the level. Dean Holsworth was just wet behind the ears, didn't really have too much to offer. But when Murdo joined in, Murdo was just about the money. Murdo was just about making money for whoever. And I thought it was hopefully for the football club so that I could spend and reinvest in the team. But it was just all murky waters, it was all smoke and mirrors. It was far too taxing on the brain for to be a first-time manager at a club as of the history of Derby County. It was just far too. It was wasteful, something profligate. The time that we wasted instead of me focusing on my job in hand. But who knows? Would I have kept my job if I'd have got rid of them? Murdo said, "I'll make sure you're in work," but I said no. I said no. I'd rather have the people who I brought into the football club. I put my credentials to. I want them to stay in work, and I'll take a walk.
I mean, there were talented players there. Rajak for a while, Idiaka, Tommy Smith, Morton Biscard, just to sort of pick some names randomly out of the air.
Good players. There's no doubt about it. But can you remember the conversation we had about Raziak, where you were asking me the question about, I think it was a 5 o'clock deadline, but that was for the Championship, and the Premier League was still 11.
I do.
I wasn't aware of that. Now, that should be of paramount importance to me, that just in case Colin Gibson phones me up. And, Colin, 5:05, top of the hour, well, you've managed to keep a hold of one or two. And I said, yeah, we've got a hold of Raziak. And by 11 o'clock that night, we'd lost him. It was good money, to be fair. I thought that was a good deal, knowing full well what the capabilities of Razak were. I think he was getting ideas above his station. I think he was getting too big for his boots. He was a player, there's no doubt about it. You know, you could play a ball up to him and he could hold it, and he caught the eye, and he had a goal in him. So there was a lot of things to like about Gregos. But what wasn't to like was he's very, very close to Murdo Mackay, and therein lies the problem that I'm talking about. You know, you have to be close to the players. You have to be the man. If you're the manager, you have to be the one that's closer to the players, nobody else. And I didn't have that power.
Were you aware that the club effectively had been told they got to raise money by the bank to reduce their overall debt, and the only saleable item they realistically had was Gregos Razak? So Razak sold, you weren't going to see the money.
I wasn't going to see the money, correct. And then you're scratching around looking for maybe loan deals or a kid that's going to come through the ranks, or
as you
whatever.
say, Dean Holdsworth having to end up playing.
Exactly. And that's the downside, you know. So you've got a group of, remember, 33,000 supporters turned up to see us playing against Leicester City. I mean, these kind of things, and that could have been the start of a beautiful friendship with regards to, okay, I make a substitution, but I take Paul Pescasolido off, who was a 1 in 5, by the way, not a goal scorer, but he had this impish way about him that supporters loved. You know, I got involved every so often, but not a goal scorer. And I brought in the lad from Tottenham, who eventually went into Europe for about 20 million, I think. And he scored the equalising goal, if you remember rightly. We draw 1-1, and I'm taking the fans on. I shouldn't be. I should be celebrating with the fans because it was a good point. 1-0 down, local derby, 33,000 supporters. We got something from the game, and a new signing had come in and came off the bench and put a goal in. I mean, these are positives, in my opinion, something to work with, you know. But once they'd made their mind up, the Derby fans, that was it. I had no chance. It doesn't matter who it was and what decisions I was making. They were always going to be wrong. But I just wanted them to understand. I really did. I just wanted them to understand what it was like behind the scenes. But I couldn't go public with it, Colin. You know what it's like. My hands were tied.
The season actually, with results, started pretty good. Unbeaten in your first 5 games. So it looked promising. And of course, Derby were hoping to build on what they'd done the previous season when George Burley was manager, got to the playoffs. Of course, George left because he delivered an ultimatum to the board, either Murdo Mackay goes or I go, and we knew what happened. Yeah.
They always say don't contact the previous manager, but I felt like I had to.
Did you speak to him then?
I spoke to George too late when I spoke to him. I've been into jobs, Colin, that I've spoke to the previous managers on the day, even before the interview, even before the press conference. And sometimes the eye-opener that you get from a manager on the way out, you know, we're a band of, I was going to say brethren there, you know, where we understand the job, and when you're out of work, you try and give a bit of advice. You try and to let people know how it really is, but you're not trying to frighten anybody off, and it could get scary, if you know what I'm saying. But I've done it many a time, and I spoke to George, and George didn't even want to pass comment about Murdo. Just the head started shaking, and you couldn't get a story out of him because there was almost a bitter taste in his mouth, you know. And when managers are like that, there's obviously a reason for it, and invariably it's them that's cost. You know, they've lost their job. They're the ones that are going to tell you the true story about what went on behind the scenes, because what went on behind the scenes was nothing short of illegal. I just didn't see it. I wasn't privy to any of it. Hence the reason why, you know, when the police got involved, nobody came knocking at my door. But I've always wanted to tell that story to Derby fans, you know, just to, not for sympathy. I don't want a sympathy vote by any stretch of the imagination, because that learning curve that I went through at Derby County stood me in good stead. And you said at the start, at the top of the show, you know, what did it mean and how did it play out in my life? One of the proudest moments, get my first job as a manager, and one of the worst moments of my career, losing my job 9 months later. And then it stood me in such a good stead. And I would say that was the sole reason for my success at Hull City. How we managed to survive in the Championship, which I was planning to do at Derby, then get promoted from the Championship to the Premier League. I actually did all that literally a year or two later. I'm not saying, listen, management's about timing, isn't it? You know, you get a job at the right time, or you catch a club at the right time. And I unfortunately caught Derby County at the wrong time for my career, but I caught Hull City at the right time.
We had this situation, as you say, Rajak had gone and he was a goal scorer, and you weren't going to get the money because they had to reduce the debt, and presumably they hadn't told you that a little bit along the line. So we suddenly had this situation of your assistant managers having to play because you're short of players, and then your goalkeeping coach ends up that he's in goal as well, Kevin Paul.
Yeah, I think that was an argument that I didn't probably, in hindsight, I shouldn't have took on. You know, I've got two good goalkeepers, both knocking at the door of the England under-21 squad. Part of the interviewing process was that I would have to sell one of them, and my immediate question to the board was, have you got any bids on the table? And there was nothing to work at, nothing to work forward towards. So I've now got a pre-season with two under-21s, and I've got to rate either one of them. And Campy won that race with regards to, you know, starting the season, as it were. And it got off all right, as you made reference to. But where Lee was concerned, he was very outspoken in the change room, and he had his own way of going on. Kevin Poole I thought, was an able coach, but he was still active. He was still working. He was still playing in training sessions, and for to take them both on, I'm going to ask you the question, Colin. Why did Campy not go in? Did I have loaned him out?
No, there was the fallout when his dad came on a Friday night and had a go at the football club. I guess he also had a go at you as well. So yeah. In that situation, you're going to say, well, all right, we'll deal with this. It really should be dealt with in-house, but Correct. It isn't in-house. It's gone public, and I can't play you, certainly this weekend.
And then I put Kevin in, and yes, 41-year-old, and it looks like a madman's move, but he gave a good account of himself, if truth be known. If you're a commentator watching the game, which you were, he actually kept us in the game at 1-0 down. Against Leicester, he pulled off an unbelievable save, tipped over the crossbar, and everybody said he was a little fella. And we get the equaliser, and that's my point, Colin. You know, there should be positivity coming from that, but it seemed as if everybody was twisting the knife and getting into conversations, or I was getting into conversation with people that I shouldn't have got into, you know, like the reasons why, as it were. The club was wide open. And anything and everything that was happening in the training ground or in the changing room or on the training pitches, we were getting exposed, you know. We were bleeding openly in front of everybody, and we were getting exposed by everything. I'm going to put this to you. You must have been loving it as a press lad, but as a Derby County fan, you would have been hating it, I should imagine. How did it feel when you were coming into the ground?
In my situation, it's the heart and the head. And as a BBC journalist, I have to do my job and use my head. And I knew that behind the scenes, this was, to use a word that you used earlier, it was a toxic situation. And that these people had got hold of the club sort of in a backdoor way a couple of years previous to this. And they were absolutely despised. And in a way, unless you repeated what had happened the previous year with George Burley, where it took everybody by surprise and got to the playoffs. Nobody expected Derby to reach the playoffs, but they got that little group of players. So for the three amigos, as they were known, to still be there, and that they were looking to get investment in, but they didn't really care about where this investment was going to come from. It was a toxic time to be at Derby County. And as a journalist, I would say that you were tarred with their brush. As a Derby fan, I was hating it. This is not what I want my football club to be. But when I go into the press box as a BBC journalist, my rattle and my scarf and my hat get left at home.
Yeah.
It's my job, unfortunately, sometimes to make your Saturday afternoons after a game miserable. So I remember a game where I think you took Pesh off and brought Stern John on, who, if I remember rightly, is an ex-Forest player. And the whole of Pride Park virtually turned on that decision. And you were the ire of the fans. Now, when I come to do my post-match interview, it's going to be the first thing I talk about.
Yeah.
You know, you've worked in media now long enough. You know how it is. Some managers can take it, and in fairness to you, you did, and you didn't throw your toys out the pram. I tell you what, there's a lot of other managers could learn a thing or two about. You just have to accept this is the way football is. And if you want the sycophants surrounding you, go and do something else.
That was the whole... I didn't want it to be the education. I wanted to be part of the process of my success. Because you all go into management hoping and praying that you're going to be a successful one. Because, after one disaster, you don't really come back from that. But I jumped into bed with Phil Parkinson, and my word, look at him 20 years later. Look at the job he's doing. And I jumped into bed with him at Hull to keep him in work because he was under a lot of pressure. From his Colchester days, he was the go-to man that they wanted. There was about 3 or 4 championship clubs chasing him, and then Hull got him. And then I went in there to help him stay in work. And my word, what a difference I got from being the guy that was being shot at to being the one that's trying to protect and stop the shooting or stop getting away with the bullets, as it were, or deflecting. And learning them skills, quite phenomenal. But then I had I don't know if you, Colin, I had a 12-13 match caretaker role. And that, for me, was because I understood what it meant in the board, the relationship where a manager and a board's concerned. And I said to the owner, on a Christmas Eve I said to the owner, I've got a game on Boxing Day, I'm going home now. And I said, I'll be up for work tomorrow morning. And I said, it's my 13th game this. If you don't give me the job after the game, I'm walking. He came to my house the next morning, 8 o'clock the next morning. And he gave me the job because I was forcing him to do something with regards to Brownie's a safe pair of hands. At the moment, Brownie's a safe pair of hands. When I was at Derby, nobody said I was a safe pair of hands. I was fighting so many people. It was phenomenal. But it was, as I say, that learning curve. It was a massive learning curve for me.
Let's finish on Derby before we go on to talk then about Hull. Actually, over Christmas, you won a couple of games and it was starting to look as if maybe the corner was going to be turned. But then the defeat at Coventry and then the cup defeat really spelt the end. And we talk about post-match interviews, and Ross Fletcher is interviewing you on the pitch at Colchester after the cup defeat, and you can hear fans in the background who are really angry shouting, and whoever was press officer at the time at Derby was trying to just say, guys, just be quiet, we're trying to do a radio interview here. You knew what was coming, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I had plans that I was staying down in Colchester. I had a friend that been involved in football for a long time, and the two families were together. We had a good weekend planned and this and the other, but I jumped in my car and drove home, left the family there just to make sure that I was on the training ground the next day. Got everybody in on the Sunday, and it was just too late. It was you could see it was coming. And then that fateful morning when Murdo walked me around pitch 1, 2 and 3, walked me around there, and the stories that were coming out of him, if I'd known these stories, he was coming out with a few home truths and this, that and the other, but the main one for me, I just couldn't get my head around it. He said, listen, I think I can keep you in work, but you've got to get rid of them too. And forget about Murdo. Just wield the axe, Bonnie lad, and I'm away. I didn't say it as nonchalant as that, of course, but it really, probably the lowest point in my career.
How long did it take you to get over it? What did you do immediately after that? Did you go away? Did you shut yourself off?
I shut myself off. I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know who to speak to. I had my family, obviously, thank God for that. But again, daughter that was 4 or 5 year old at the time, and the missus, she had nothing to do with football, but obviously somebody to lean on. It was a bleak moment, it was a real dark moment for me, that. And it was only lit up by a phone call literally 8-9 months later when Adam Pearson phoned me up. And again, like the man that I am, you're probably thinking I've answered this the wrong way, but this is the conversation. Adam Pearson phoned me up and just said, "Phil, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm out of work. I'm not." He said, "Derby clear with you?" And so went through the rigmaroles of the legalities. And I said, "Yeah, I'm absolutely clear of Derby." And he went, "I'd like you to come on the training ground and help Phil Parkinson keep in work, keep his job." And this is coming from the owner. And I've just bluntly answered it by saying, with all due respect, I'll be on the training ground if Phil Parkinson asks me, not if the owner asks me. That was the start of a good friendship with Adam Pearson. I'm an honourable guy when it comes down to the game. At least I think I am. I try to do the right thing. And Phil Parkinson has had a great career, but at the time, he'd won a lot of things at Colchester. And obviously Lear Road was a bit of a hellhole to go to, as was proven at the end of my Derby career. But Phil was having a hard time. He's been headhunted by Hull City. There was 3 or 4 other clubs wanted him, and he'd gone in there and he just wasn't getting a tune out of the players. So the next day, after Adam Pearson had phoned me, Phil Parkinson phoned me. He just said, "Come across and meet." So we went across. I met, and I was going to say the rest's history, but probably 5 or 6 games later, he was out of work. And I really felt it as if I'd let him down. I really did. I felt his pain because I'd just gone through it. Now I don't think I was through my pain. I don't think I'd served me time enough. I don't think I'd done enough away from Derby to get rid of it. And now I'm seeing a guy that I've been brought in to keep in work is out of work 5 or 6 games after that. The nice part of it, if there is such a thing, was Colin Murphy was the common denominator. Colin Murphy, the great Colin Murphy, and I have to call him that because he was priceless for me at that moment in time. He could see me going through pain. He could see me going through turmoil because of his experiences, and he intercepted some of the stuff I was doing. If I'd done it wrong, he would intercept it before he even got to it, And consequently, because of that, he said, "Listen, I don't want the job." Because I was asking him if he wanted the job full time. And he was saying, "No, I don't want the job." He said, "I want you to get the job." I said, "Fair enough. I mean, that's brilliant." To have support like that, which I didn't have at Derby, was just a moment. It was just a moment for me. And he provided that service free of charge. It was just, I'd walk in the morning, and he'll know there's something wrong with me. I'll walk in the morning and I'm full of the joys of spring, and he'll bring me down a peg just saying, "Concentrate, think about your work." And, all of them things, just little reminders, little markers from an experienced guy, didn't half stand me in good stead.
Derby fans that are old enough, of course, will remember him being at Derby, running the academy team. Then eventually got put in charge of the first team. And one thing you do share, that, you were both sacked by Derby.
But he wore it like a badge of pride, and I hadn't gone through. I had to go through a sort of cathartic method to try and get rid of that Derby feeling, and I'm not, Colin, to this day, I'm not sure I've gone through it. Every time I go to Derby County, I love the place. I think it's my sister still lives in Burton, brother-in-law. They still tell me a lot of stories that's going on at Derby, etc., etc. So there's all sorts of connections I've still got in that area. But the one big connection was, myself and Colin both had been sacked by Derby County. But you move on. That's what Colin was telling me. You've got to move on. If you don't move on, you can't succeed. And I think that success came from the fact that I had a backroom staff that I trusted, that I believed in. Brian Horton I brought on side. He stepped in for Colin Murphy when he become a little bit too tough. And Steve Parkin, who's with Phil Parkinson now at Wrexham. Experienced guys that can just see a little curveball coming, or they can see somebody's just around the corner is going to shoot you, whatever. They could see it coming and they read it for you. And honestly, it's absolutely priceless, your backroom stuff.
And Hull City was great fun, wasn't it?
It started off a bit of a, like I say, the merry-go-round with regards to Phil Parkinson losing his job, and then all of a sudden I'm taking caretaker role for 13 games. Then I pushed the owner into giving me the position until the end of the season, but everything was based on survival. We survived on the second last game of the season. I think we're at Cardiff, it might have been the last game actually. We're at Cardiff away, we won 1-0, but Leeds United had a disaster, and they went down and we survived. And I was walking around the pitch waving to our fans who had travelled all the way to Cardiff, and there was 2 or 3 guys in Hull City ties who I didn't recognise on the pitch, and Adam Pearson had been selling the club behind everybody's back, obviously, because it's it's his business, for about 3-4 months, and these people that were walking around the pitch were doing all the due diligence on everybody, and they'd been doing a lot of work behind the scenes on me. Is he the man for the job? Is he going to be? So not only had I survived, I've been sacked by Derby less than a year ago, beforehand. Now I'm in this survival campaign. I've survived, which was what I had to do. I'm now interviewing for the job again because Adam had told the club. But the interview was in Leeds. We did the Malmaison in Leeds, and they were asking what my plans were, and I was bringing 1 or 2 bodies in, and I had names. I had all sorts of ideas and things lined up, and the bigger picture was the new training ground. The bigger picture was, taking the club to the Premier League, and they were saying, don't be banging that drum. That's a 3-year plan. Don't be banging, don't be bringing pressure on yourself and all this kind of stuff. But I was used to it, I was used to the fact that me and Sam got promoted, what was classed as a yo-yo team in the 90s at Bolton Wanderers. When we got promoted in 2000, we had made this plan that we were going to stay there. And the plan was born out of fantastic ideas on and off the field of play, but innovation. Bringing in people like JJ Kocher. I mean, I can't, hold my hands up and say I'm part and parcel of that. That was all Sam. But he was brilliant in the transfer market, and that's what you need, You need people that are creative and can be brilliant in the transfer market, not to the standards of Murdo Mackay, but to the standards of the chief scout who's running the show. The chief scout giving everybody the nod. I've seen him 4 times. Go and see him manager, go and see him first team coach, go and see him assistant manager. So you're going through a process, and invariably we didn't get the transfers wrong. And we built and we built and we stayed in the Premier League until we left.
And you delivered Premier League football to Hull City.
Yeah, that was, again, going from the low of being sacked by Derby County to the high of getting promoted through the playoffs. And I've just been, I haven't been back, Colin, to the ground on a match day since I left. I've been to functions, I've been to dinners, I've been invited, by the ex-players and this, that and the other. But I'd never been to a game, and I got an invite. It's maybe because of the regimes that had been, the people that owned the football club when I was there. It had changed on 2 or 3. The alarms had come in. There was a lot of foreign investment in Hull. But I'd never got an invite to come back or anything like that, so I never really bothered. Done work with the BBC. I've been to see games that way, but I'd never been invited by the football club. And then all of a sudden I got a call, dear me, about 3 months ago. Could I come? It was actually 4 months ago. It was the day I got the Peterborough sports job, and they said, "Can you come and do a game with Giovanni?" One of the success stories of your signing, when you were at Hull City. And I said, "Love to, absolutely love to." So I planned for this date, and then I got the job, and I had to turn them down. And then the only Sunday available was literally the first Sunday of January, when they were playing Watford. And they asked me, would I come along? And I said, absolutely. I said, but obviously Giovanni lives in Brazil. He's not going to be there. I was the only one there. So I did an interview with regards to Giovanni. Then I start doing lounges, and I was working and I was bumping into people I had not seen for 10, 15 years. And it was brilliant. You know, when you talk about cathartic, it was, you know, to try and get something out of your system, go back to it and revisit it. I've never actually done that at Derby. I'd love to go back to the training ground. I'd love, you know, without a team and just have a little scratch and sniff about the place, you know. But I did it at Hull, and then 10 to 3, I'm working the biggest lounge in the stadium. 10 to 3 comes along, a guy comes walking up, takes the microphone off the compy and says, the game's been postponed. Well, I've never seen anything like it. I'm now working till about half time, which was half time. I'm working the lounges till half time. But I really enjoyed myself. I really did, because I bumped into Andy Dawson, I bumped into Nicky Barmby, I bumped into Ian Ashby and Brian Hughes and all the players that we had. My word, it doesn't half bring back memories when you bump into people and you just see the same guy that you were talking to in the changing room.
Football is clearly in your blood, as you say. You're still working now. But when you look back, and as you say, Derby is still a big name in football, even though for the majority of the 21st century they've been a second division or third division club, to use the old terminology. Do you think back, Derby, it was the right club, but at the wrong time?
Yes, 1,000,000%. Great words, well said, good question. But no doubt about it, it was the right club. I've still got a real feeling for Derby County, but at the wrong time, as you've just made reference to. I'm fighting too many fires. I'm putting too many fires out. I'm scrapping with everybody. I've got to have my wits about me every minute of the day. I know this is management full stop, but you know, you should be able to put your work down every so often. You should be able to relax every so often, especially in your family's presence. And I was probably a horrible person at the time, because I was defending everything, you know. And it was in the name of Derby County. That's what I was defending. I was hoping and praying that we would turn this corner. And who knows, you know, whether you're a religious person or not. Is it Derby County that's going to turn the corner, or is it Phil Brown that's going to turn the corner? And I had, when I left Derby County, I had to start thinking it was me that has to turn the corner. I have to be better than what I was. I have to see things for what they are and deal with them better. But as a learning curve, as an apprenticeship, I couldn't wish Derby County at that moment in time on anybody. Any friend of mine, I would have said, no, don't take it. And yet I took it because of the club. And I'm talking about the club. I'm not talking about the people in the club. I took it because of the club. Great support, great football team, and steeped in English tradition as well, the history of English football, you know, all them years back, and my word. And that's my first job, and I make a hash of it. But I know why I made a hash of it. I just didn't have the support mechanism in place.
Phil, thanks for sharing your story. Coming up in episode 13, Rory Delap. Now, if you've missed any of our conversations so far, from the likes of Phil G, Eric Steele, Craig Bryson, Roy McFarland or Colin Todd, they're available wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks to Rams Trust and 7 Restaurant and Cafe Bar in Derby for supporting us. Located on Derby's Pride Park, 7 is the leading destination for all-day dining, artisan coffee and handcrafted cocktails. With a focus on quality, seasonal ingredients and a welcoming atmosphere, 7 is where the community comes together to relax, connect and celebrate.
Life After the Rams is a Backpass production.